looking at here to start is the central portion of the North American continent, also known as the U.S., unfortunately. But anyway, so Oklahoma is right down here. It is the central south. So we'll zoom in here to take a closer look. So Oklahoma City is right here, and that's right at the center of the state. And so over here is where you kind of have the little panhandle portion, and you have New Mexico over here to its west. And then south and sort of west you have Texas, because Texas has the square panhandle that sticks up here. And then you have the Red River that forms the squiggly border between, and that separates Oklahoma City and Tulsa from Dallas and Fort Worth down here in Texas. So something to note about the Red River region is that it is actually the prime hotspot for tornadoes in the entire world. It has the highest rate of tornadoes per year out of anywhere, and Oklahoma is the state that takes the cake in terms of that statistic. It is the top state for tornadoes. And I'll explain kind of some reasons as to why that is. So if we zoom out here, Tornado Alley refers to all of these central states from Texas down here up through Oklahoma, Kansas, Nebraska, South Dakota, and North Dakota. And the reason why tornadoes are so common here comparative to other parts of the world and other parts of the continent itself is that we have two major climatic influences. We have the Gulf of Mexico down here, which covers a lot of this wide, expansive coastal plain that provides this shallow continental shelf underneath all of this hot water, and that makes the water heat up quicker than just the open ocean. You know, the Pacific over here is very cold in comparison to the Gulf, where the water is much hotter. And then we also have the other major influence, which is the Rocky Mountains. And the Rocky Mountains give us a lot of cold air that sweeps eastward, because a lot of our climatic and a lot of our weather events shift from west to east. As you can see, if you watch the radar, storms are always barreling from the west over to the east. And so, as that happens, as storm events are moving from west to east, the air in the storms cool down a lot over the Rockies and bring cold air. And then we have that hot, wet air coming from the Gulf, and Oklahoma is just that perfect mixing place for those two. And that gives us the volatile conditions that readily develop tornadoes. So Texas is a little bit lower risk because it has less of the cold Rocky Mountain influence. And if you go northward, Kansas, Nebraska are a little bit lower risk than Oklahoma because they're further from that hot Gulf air. So Oklahoma is just in this hot spot right in the middle of those two very distinct climatic influences. So that is why it is the tornado capital. So the Red River region specifically, so that very southern portion of Oklahoma is the absolute most dangerous for tornadoes, statistically speaking. So, you know, if you're not from Oklahoma or other central states here, I would definitely not recommend traveling through during tornado season. If you're not prepared and you don't know what to do in the case of tornado, it's going to be a very horrifying experience. I've I've personally never had experiences with that in Oklahoma, but I have driven through Texas and I've driven through Kansas during tornado season and had very horrifying near-death experiences where the storms were just so bad, and then, you know, getting the tornado warnings blaring on your phone. I'm fortunate I've never had to actually see a tornado in my view, and I've never gotten hurt by one in any way, but it's not fun when you're driving through one of the most horrifying thunderstorms of your life and you know that there are tornadoes around. So anyway, yeah, I don't go through this region during March to July anymore. But anyway, so yeah, but for people who live there, you know, they have to adapt and they have to deal with this on a yearly basis. And so yeah, it's one of the tricky realities of this region. And it's obviously only made worse by warming climate. All of that excess carbon dioxide in our atmosphere from industry is only making the tornado-bearing storms more common and more violent. So anyway, that's a note on that. But yeah, back to just kind of some more general stuff about Oklahoma. It has quite an unfortunate history, like a lot of this country, and that is because of its role in the Trail of Tears. So a lot of Native American tribes were forced westward out of the eastern coast and Appalachian regions and were forced into Oklahoma. And so there are quite a few Native nations here. So I'm going to name them for you. We have the Osage Reservation, that is northwest of Tulsa. The Cherokee Nation is more eastward of Tulsa, and that is just one portion of the Cherokee Nation because there is another portion over in western North Carolina, north of the Georgia border, and there's a town called Cherokee there, and so yeah, this is also much closer to the actual historical geographic region that the Cherokee people lived prior to colonization. And anyway, just thought I would mention that. And then southeast of Tulsa, we have the Choctaw Nation. More close to Tulsa and Oklahoma City, there is the Muskogee Creek Nation. And then south of Oklahoma City, there is the Chickasaw Nation. And then sort of between the Muskogee and the Chickasaw, there is the Seminole Nation. So yeah, you know, Oklahoma was basically originally promised to a lot of these native tribes to be a place where they could move, that the U.S. government at the time claimed they would, you know, not bother them, and of course they did not stay true to that promise because the U.S. government didn't truly make actual promises, only lies. So unfortunately that was not held true, and the U.S. still went in and developed their own cities for their white supremacist citizens. So anyway, so there is a complicated history here in Oklahoma, but anyway, I've only been to Oklahoma myself maybe 3 times. I've only ever really passed through it. I-40 runs just straight horizontally through the state and runs through Oklahoma City. And I haven't seen much in the state of Oklahoma, but one place I saw that was really beautiful was a place called Eufaula Lake, and that's right over here. And it was just a nice spot to see some water amongst the sea of grassland. And yeah, I think they have like camping there. And I believe I just stopped at a day use site, but so that's a really beautiful spot. And yeah, and then when you kind of get, so I guess I'll explain some of the more ecological sort of characteristics. So in the eastern part of the state, we're much closer to the Mississippi River. So the river is here. And runs down and then goes to New Orleans there. Oh, and then also the Red River that we talked about earlier feeds into the Mississippi here, and then it actually comes back off and is considered a distributary because it leaves the Mississippi and reaches the Gulf on its own. So that's kind of interesting, a unique little river situation going on there. But anyway, so yeah, anyway, what I was talking about is that closer to the Mississippi, it's a lot more fertile. There's a lot more, forests and woodlands over here. And then as you get to western Oklahoma, the forests are all gone. All you have is grassland with some scattered woodlands. And then when you get really up to the high grassland transitioning into New Mexico, you start to see some more shrubland and way less trees. You really barely see any trees anymore at all. So yeah, that's kind of the biome sort of configuration that exists in Oklahoma. And yeah, Oklahoma is quite interesting in that some people would consider it to be a Midwestern state, but really I would say most people who I've heard their opinion on the state would consider it to be the South. But that's why I started off by just calling it the South Central region, because to me Oklahoma and Texas, I don't think there's really anything better to say there, because calling it the South is sort of a relic of Confederate times and lumping everything from, this southeastern region and south central region into the South. But really, in terms of the frame of reference of the U.S., SoCal and Arizona and New Mexico are the South as well. So, but most people who would consider Oklahoma the South don't consider like Arizona to be the South. They consider that to be the West. So anyway, it's one of those states that's sort of ambiguous in terms of regionization, similar to Arkansas east of it. Arkansas is also considered sort of both the Midwest and the South. Oh yeah, and another thing I did not mention when talking about sort of the natural landscapes is that in the far northeastern corner of Oklahoma, you have the Ozarks. And so the Ozarks are this sort of region, and they are a small little mountain range, a very old ancient mountain range. And so the mountains are very weathered down, as you can see, in comparison to looking at the Rocky Mountain Range, which you can see very vividly without having to go quite far, as far in. Anyway, so the Ozarks are a really beautiful area. There are lots of rolling hills, and yeah, it's a very peaceful sort of region in comparison to if you go anywhere east of there, because everything gets a lot busier and more populated, eastward. So anyway, yeah, that's just some notes about the Ozarks. And the Ozarks are really mostly located in Missouri and Arkansas, but they slightly dip into Texas and Oklahoma as well. So yeah, and then there's also this region. Let me see, it might be a little harder for me to find. I think it was near Oklahoma City. Yeah, give me 1 second. Let's see. The Wichita. Okay, yes, the Wichita Mountains. They are southwest of Oklahoma City. Yeah, let's see. I'm using my phone as a reference right now. But yeah, I do most of these videos just, looking at the map and recalling what I can just visually. But Oklahoma's a little more difficult because it's hard to find visual cues in the grassland. But anyway, over in this region, this is a town called Lawton, and then the Wichita Mountains are over here. And let's see, I think it's over here is the Quartz Mountain State Park. And that's where you can see some granitic features outcropping in the grassland. I've personally never been here before, but it's somewhere that I definitely really would like to go in Oklahoma. But yeah, so that's kind of an interesting little tidbit. But yeah, that's the state of Oklahoma. I wish I had more to say about it, but like I said, I don't really have much personal experience there. And for these map videos, the style that I do is I like to just go based off my personal experiences, and that's why I also like to just remove the borders, because I like looking at all of these places for how they connect to the continent, and I really couldn't care less about borders and, where the government decides that things start and end, the U.S. government really is not a legitimate government anyway. It was built on genocide and slavery from the beginning, so to me the borders are not legitimate either. So yeah, anyway. So yeah, that's Oklahoma. And yeah, thank you so much for joining me today. Sorry that it couldn't be a longer video. This is kind of a shorter one. But yeah, just wanted to kind of share those sort of tidbits. And yeah, next time I am planning to do sort of an exploration of the Pacific Ocean, and possibly looking at some earthquake or volcano simulators to show why we call this region the Ring of Fire. So that's what is up next. But yeah, let's just say goodbye to Oklahoma for now. Alrighty, thank you so much for joining me, and I will see you in the next one. Thank you so much. Bye bye.